Anyway, Dipti is here. Shall we move on to talk about the foreign press? They're talking about François Fillon, just like us, aren't they?
That's right. The Conservative candidate François Fillon has vowed to continue running for election despite the fake job scandal that has overshadowed and at times impeded his actual campaigning steward. The Belgian newspaper Le Soir describes his speech on Wednesday as a defense argument with populist tones, while the British daily The Guardian says Fillon is playing his last card. He's in bunker mode, avoiding the public. I quote from The Guardian, "Once again, he has refused to quit, but badly wounded and with his party bewildered and divided, it remains to be seen if he'll even reach the finish line in May." Finally, the Swiss paper Le Temps reminds us that the point of this election is not to settle scores with critics or to defend family honor. It's to be elected to lead a country and inspire its people. And to that end, Le Temps says Fillon, quote, assassinated a certain conception of the presidential election yesterday by attacking the French justice system.
Now, to a lot of the people in the international community, perhaps to our viewers as well, it might seem rather baffling that Fillon even dares to run with his name tarnished like this.
That's right. And it's something that the New York Times are looking at in this article that's really interesting. They explain it pretty well. Basically, in France, as we know, there's this separation between the public and private sector or public and private life. Even if the French people are becoming less tolerant of this divide, it still exists. And the New York Times says in this article that the key takeaway is that Fillon knows even if he were to step aside, Les Républicains, his party, have no other real options. Alain Juppé and Nicolas Sarkozy, the two men who came behind him in the primary elections, have their own financial skeletons. And as Politico explains, the younger members of Les Républicains are seen as a little too green, even up against someone like Emmanuel Macron, who himself is very green but extremely charismatic. So the party really is finding itself between a rock and a hard place. Certain French MPs have described Fillon's presidential campaign as, quote, a suicide mission.
That's French politics. Going to talk about US ones now. Reports in the Washington Post that the US Attorney General Jeff Sessions lied about his connections with Russia.
Well, the Post has published a report saying that Jeff Sessions, the U.S. Attorney General, spoke twice with the Russian ambassador to the U.S., Sergei Kislyak, last year. The Post says when asked by lawmakers back in January about his contact with members of the Russian government prior to or after the elections, he said he'd never been in contact with them. His response was no. And Sessions' defense is that his conversations with Kislyak is one of many he had with many ambassadors around the world. But this is really important because there's already a lot of suspicion looming over just how much of a hand Russia played in the U.S. elections last year. Some are now calling for a special counsel to be set up to investigate Russia's role in the election, while others are saying, like Michael Flynn, before him the national security advisor, Sessions should also be fired.
Germany now, visit by the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, causing a lot of controversy. Tell us more about that.
Well, basically, it started back in February, on the 14th of February, Stuart, when German journalist for Die Welt, his name is Dennis Yücel, was arrested in Turkey, accused of, quote, terrorist propaganda. He's been held there ever since. And the Frankfurter Allgemeine reports that Angela Merkel has demanded his release. But remember, this is election year in Germany, and people are expecting a lot more than words from Angela Merkel, who's running for re-election. The Guardian reports that Erdogan is meant to visit Germany at some point to campaign amongst the country's 1.4 million strong diaspora ahead of a very important constitutional referendum in April in Turkey. And Merkel is facing calls to prevent him from coming into the country and having that rally until at least the German journalist is released.
Going to end on something completely different from Dipsy. This is a piece in The Guardian, British newspaper, about a growing number of daring bucket lists.
I'd love to say let's end on something light. It's not, It doesn't seem so light when I explain it, because The Guardian reports that pensioners, among other people, but generally people who don't have a lot of time to live, are getting more and more creative and crazy with their bucket list. The bucket list, of course, a list of things you want to do before you die. Recently, for instance, a 99-year-old Dutch woman asked police to arrest her and throw her into a cell. which they did, complete with a photo of her beaming as she got her perp walk.
Okay.
A girl with terminal cancer got to fulfill her wish of tasering a police officer, while another pensioner got to fulfill his lifelong desire, apparently, of smashing a car through his garage.
Okay.
But mind you, it's not just humans. Dogs also get their own bucket list. One dog got his wish, apparently his wish, of spending his last moments swimming in a Scottish lake, having a pint of beer, which I assume could have killed him earlier,
Yeah. Okay.
and a light fish supper.
Well, that's not bad. He told us that. That's what he wanted. That's
Apparently.
what the dog said.
That's what the dog said.
That's what the dog said. All right. Thank you. Ditty with papers on France 24.